Hello and welcome to Office Hours. We have our first hour is question and answer on any of your media or virtual production events. Our second hour on Saturdays is our education hour. So stay with us, and Dave Troutman will be discussing a topic, when to use video in the classroom. It's a very powerful medium, and we'll definitely want to take advantage of leveraging this utility. If you'd like to help us to join our team, you can do so on our website at officehours.global. Saturday is a day when people try new roles, both in front of and behind the camera. So join the link in our email and feel free to join us. So let's get into our questions. Ronny, what do we have?
Thanks, Josh. Our first question comes from Andy Carluccio in San Francisco, California. I enjoyed answering your ZoomISO version 2 questions in after hours yesterday. It's a different experience from doing a second hour, as we can get more technical. How can I improve these workshops and Q&A sessions for you to make them more valuable or helpful?
Thank you, Ronny. I believe, Ronny, that's your first contribution on the panel. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Can you tell us a little about where you're from and what you do?
Yeah, so I am in La Plata, Maryland. It's a suburb about 30 minutes south of Washington, D.C. I split my time between being an ER nurse, so you'll hear in after hours occasionally they will say, "There's Nurse Ronny," but also I work in House of Worship production.
Fantastic. Well, great to have you. Let's see, back to our question of ZoomISO. Mitchell, do you want to weigh in?
Sure. By the way, congratulations, Ronny. Good to have you on board. That was a real treat yesterday to see Andy Carluccio come in and answer anything about ZoomISO. It's just a real treat to be able to get that kind of access. And I don't think I'll ever get used to it being that simple. But I had a question about a completely different use than most people would use to maybe even a business model where I was recording corporate clients virtually using ZoomISO to get a high quality scraped version, although he doesn't like the word scraped. So we got to come up with a different word for that. It was described to the nth detail online. So to your point about how can you make it better, I don't know how much better it can get than to speak to the lead designer, programmer, cheerleader for ZoomISO. And if we could do it on a regular basis, that would be a nice trick. And the bonus was, I think Alex was sitting to his left the whole time at 090.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I think it was great. And I think that we hope to do more of these with a variety of different partners. The idea is to really, my goal with the second hours is really kind of to introduce people to ideas and bring new people in to talk about those, but not to necessarily do a lab. That's really where I think that Office Hours, does a better job at doing that. And so I think that it's great. Like, I think that yesterday was a great example of we had the folks on from Qlab, so that I thought did an incredible job of, kind of introducing us to some of the new features, talking about what they did, but we really didn't dig into, okay, this is how Qlab works. Now what we want to do is, of course, invite them in to have a lab like what we saw there, to really talk and walk through it. And I think that symbiotic relationship between Office Hours and After Hours makes a lot of sense. And so, because I just wanted something that's very listenable during Office Hours, some visuals as well, but something that you can just listen to and really feel like you got something out of it, and it's relatively cogent and to the point. But what I really think was great about the After Hours is it's really just opened, and I think that if you're at all doing virtual production, I really do believe that ZoomISO is the future of what we're for what we're doing. And if you're interested in it, now is the moment to get in. Like, this is the wave. I know everyone talks about going back to work, but you just want to think about, this is physical production, and this is what happened. All of this, there used to be like a cliff like this, and all of this here fell away. So it still looks like it's the same size, maybe a little bit bigger, but everything below it is about to start cracking and start falling through. And the moment for us to get it, to really take advantage of it, is right now, and we can do that as a group. And and I admit that this is what Office Hours was. When I conceived it of an idea, it was being ready for this moment. And so I think that we want to take advantage of the moment as a group. I think the things that can improve it, I do want to give Andy, I'm going to get Andy a telestrator so that he can, within 2 weeks, the next time he comes, we'll have my little telestrator thing set up so that he can draw things and talk about ideas. I think that I don't know if he needs it, but I think it'll be fun to have that available. I think the other thing that what we can do as a group to make it better is to really bang on ISO and come up with questions and be really ready. I think that we could have, barraged Andy a little bit more than we did, with more questions and really digging into it. So my recommendation, there's going to be a time in a year or two where we just talk about the fact that Andy was available to sit there and just, it's kind of like when in the early days of Pixel Core, John Knoll, from ILM, is my old supervisor, and he was trying to get something done with the Apollo. He was doing some visualization, and I said, well, some Pixel Core members could help you model, create 3D models of the, the Saturn V and other things like that. And they'll do it really high detailed. And so John Knoll would come every Saturday down to the Pixel Core offices and hang out with our folks and talk about details and what he wanted and everything else. And that opportunity is gone. It was a great moment for a couple months, and they produced great work, in the same sense, and they learned a lot, and a lot of them ended up moving from whatever industry they were in to computer graphics, and did really well in that area. I think the opportunity is very similar in the sense that I think that we have this moment that we can really take full advantage of the fact that we have really incredible access to the team. And I think that we want to take advantage of it. It's really, for everyone here, this is the moment to take advantage of it and to build a group of us that can support each other. Really, Office Hours is built around a kind of a peer-to-peer idea where the more of us learn it, the faster we can all learn it together. And so right now we have the opportunity to really get a hold of that core knowledge and also affect the trajectory of the product. The product is still moving. So us saying, well, this is what we really need. And the only way for us to know what we need is to do it, is to put it into shows. So that's why I'm putting it into the Michael Krasny show. I found a wall yesterday. But we're testing a lot of those things and giving feedback back to the team is going to allow us to have the product that we want. I just need to say that I've been doing this for a long time. You only get these windows for about, a couple months, where things are soft, the product's soft, the team is available, and you want to take full advantage of that. So we're definitely going to do as many of these as the team is willing to do with us. And then we should do some on our own, but we really want to become masters of this and also to guide the development of it so that we can, becomes the product that we need for our projects.
Yeah, totally hear you, Alex. I've been the guy to bug developers via email, like, please, could you add this feature? Right. And I'll draw a little diagram up for you, and could you just put it here? And if you worked it, whatever. And I've through much persistence, I've been able to get some developers to do that, and they've been bullet point options on their thing. But yeah, that softness is definitely there as far as development, and being able to have the ear of the developer is fantastic. Humble beginnings. We remember Andy coming into the Zoom test kitchen and having our own little scrum there too. Yeah. So it's nice to have a regular spot where we know Andy set aside time to
and I think we're hoping to get some of the other team on, from that team on as well. So we definitely have some opportunities there to schedule in some time. Pretty exciting.
Nice. Yeah. So some of the team there. Andy's really focused on the engineering side, and some of the other team there are, they're in the field doing the events too. So they're our peers. So great to be able to do that. Mitchell.
What was fun was one of the questions I asked Andy, and he carefully answered it. I was asking if his relationship now with Zoom provides a trajectory to incorporate features from ZoomISO that much faster, that much better, and so much reading between the lines determined, yes, it's definitely already bearing fruit. So that's just a very valuable relationship. Also, Mike on the panel chat suggests that we record Andy so that we have that for future reference.
We're not going to record him. We can't record him. You got to be there. So.
All right, so we'll look forward to that on Friday. Let's go to our next question.
Next question is from Andre Dolly in Berlin. What exactly is the new linear key feature in Qlab, and why is Alex so excited about it?
Alex?
So a linear key is here's the problem is that there's a couple different kinds of keys. There is a chroma key. This is all about pulling green screen. There is a chroma key, and a chroma key basically just looks at how much of a certain color there is, how much chroma is in a certain area. So it just looks at these pixels and says, what is the chroma of this, and it can be blue or green. It typically only works in those two areas, and it's a very easy to calculate, thing to do, but it is very imprecise. It's just very rough. You get rough edges, and so one of the things about the linear key, the way a linear key works. Now, there's also what we call a geometric key, which is much harder to calculate in real time, which most people don't use, and that is building it is a geometric shape inside of the color space to identify colors, and that's what Primat is. But we're not talking about that right now. And you can do a lot of really interesting things with it. But one of the ways to get the most realistic edges is what we call a linear key. And what a linear key does is you have your red, green, and blue. And typically what happens is the green screen is going to be the highest point on that, and your red and the blue is going to be a little bit lower. If you think about, imagine the gray screen behind me being green, what you would see is if you go along this edge here, in here I have even some green, some red, some blue. Here, if I did my key well, I have mostly green. So it's just a little bit of red and a little bit of blue. So what happens is if I take the red and the blue and I average them, so I literally add them together and then divide them by 2, I get this mat that is whitish in here because it's the red and the blue combined. And it should be very dark where the green is because there was no green in there. And it should be very dark where the green is because there's no red and blue in here. So this should be near 0, and this should be nearer to 1 on the core. When I subtract that, you don't want to think about this being, you don't want to think about these numbers being 0 to 255. You want to think about them as being 0 to 1. So if this is near 1, and my green is very low because I didn't have a lot of green. I'm not wearing a lot of green. So let's say my green is, and you think about this as what we call pixel math. It's for each pixel. The green here might be, very low, but my red pixels could be very high. When I subtract those red pixels from the green pixel, it goes to black. It gets to 0 because if I subtracted 0.5 from 0.2 with an absolute, it's going to go to 0, right? So now all of these become black in here, and hopefully, if the red and blue are not very close to green, this color out here stays pretty light because the green was near 1, and the red and the blue are very low. They only move it down a little bit, but they move the center part, this area here, to black. And then you add a little contrast to it, and that creates a white a white area out here and a black area here, and that starts to define your key. What's really nice about it when you do it that way is that you have very soft, nice, beautiful edges, and you have soft edges with little wisps of hair and all the detail that you want, because it is using that image. It's not making a calculation and choosing pixels. It's using the image against itself, and it's a much more refined key. This is the way Ultimat works as well, and so is using this linear key. Now you might have to add contrast. You might have to do a lot of other bits and pieces to it, but that's how a linear key works. Now the other piece that I haven't been able to test with Qlab will be my next request, is what we call an unspill, which is building a key like that basically neutralizes the green. But I have to see what that, how far it's always with me. There's always one request after the next. So we'll take a look at that. But I think that I've been telling people to add linear keys to what they do for a decade, and they're one of the first to actually just do it. And it's computationally, it's nothing. But I think it just, people didn't understand why they would do that when they had, a lot of the reason people use chroma keys is because you can open up a white paper book and then it'll just be like, here's the calculation for a chroma key, and then they put it in and go, okay, now I have a key. But the opportunity to make much cleaner keys is much higher with a linear key.
Thank you, Alex. And Mark?
My question was on the Ultimat, and Alex answered it.
Yeah. Very good. Mitchell?
I was going to say, do you use both at any time, Alex, a linear and a chroma key at the same time?
No, sometimes I use multiple linear keys. So I don't use, and sometimes if you need to identify a color other than one of the primaries, red, green, or blue, then I will tend to want to use a geometric key, because the geometric key doesn't care. So what the geometric key does is if you think about the red, green, and blue, a cube where red and green and blue are different edges, the geometric key builds literally a shape inside of there with coordinates of this is what this color is that you want to get rid of. And as you sample the symbol, so if you want to do orange or something else, you're just sampling points inside of this thing, and it'll build usually 128 side geometric object that defines what you want to actually select there. So if you think about like your LUTs, your lookup tables, it looks like a LUT, except there's a shape inside of it that's defining what you're selecting. And it can be anything. So when you're doing something other than the primary colors, that works pretty well. When I want to do when I'm working on it, one of the things that I do a lot when we're trying to do a lot of keying is the problem is that out here doesn't matter and in here doesn't really matter, right? The only thing that matters with a key is right along this edge, here. So what I want to do is I want to reduce any calculations that are going to, I don't want to be pushing contrast out here, in my key, so, to just get rid of this, because that's going to affect the quality of my edge. So what I often do is do what we call a procedural garbage mat. So I pull the key exactly the way I did it before, and then what I do is I jam the contrast. So I just move the contrast so it's all black and white. And then what I do is I then do an expand, and so that's or minimize or min or max, depends on how you calculate it. And what that'll do is that'll just move this out here. So basically it builds this thing. And the cool thing about this is that I'm not drawing it. It moves with me. So if I move back and forth, that key is going to move with it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that and I'm going to multiply it to the background. So it just pushes it all to black or white, depending on which way I want it to go. And then I do the same thing. I take that same key and I pull it in to build a procedural core mat. So now then I push that core to the center. So that way, if someone's wearing a green tie or something, it just pushes it out. So basically, you build these two mats, you blur them a little bit so they have some fade. Now, when you do your original key, you generally, and this is, we can do this we used to be able to do this in real time with Conduit, but we haven't been able to do it real time for a long time, because without it. And so, only 15 years later, we can't do it anymore. So anyway, but we do this in post all the time. And so then what you do is you only have to worry about this area. This is the only area your key is working on, is what's outside of the core mat and inside of and they're all procedural, which means that they are going to they're going to move with the person. So if the person's moving, it can still do that, and I don't have to keyframe a garbage mat or a core mat to make that work. Now, the only other thing we might sometimes do is what we call divide and conquer, which is that I might cut my head out like this with a garbage mat. And so I have these core mats, and then I have this separated, and I usually try to find a seam somewhere that you're not going to notice that there's two different keys. And then I'm going to key this. This will be easy to key, and then I really only have to worry, the key only has to worry about that head. And again, this is why it's also really important to make sure this is as even as possible, because it reduces the amount of work that you have to do to make that happen. Anyway.
And Alex, what tools are you using? You mentioned Conduit. Is this something available to the ATEM hardware?
The stuff I just talked about is not. Like that stuff you have to do in post. You can do it in something like Fusion. You can do it in After Effects, and I don't know if so when we used to do a lot of keying in Motion, but it's because we put Conduit into Motion. We literally had a nodal compositor as a plugin in Motion years ago, and so that was the best keyer that we ever. I mean, it's like a flame, because this is like 2008, and it would comp it in real time with a nodal compositor that was comping while it was looping, and we built it because we were doing a movie that. We were working on a movie that had 105 green screen shots, and we had a very small budget to do those in. And so we, and so we had to figure out a way to make that happen. And so we built that out of necessity, and it worked really well for a long time. But Conduit never, most people just didn't understand it, so it didn't sell enough to keep it going. So that's what happened.
Okay, gotcha. So this is mostly post-production.
Post-production now, yeah. And someone could go back, and I think we could all pull money and see if we can just hire Pauly and get him to rewrite it for us. But that'd be it. It'd be easier now. I will say it would be easier with metal now with the Mac M1s. It would be much easier to write stuff that does this than it was before.
That's your pitch. It's much easier now. Let's rewrite it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's go to our next question.
Next question comes from Ernest Floyd in Bastrop, Louisiana. Can you recommend a good electronics store in London? The airlines lost one of my suitcases. Need to get some switches, routers, Ethernet cables, etc.
Oh, no.
And see, the problem is that these shops, you don't see them around much anymore. I remember the first time I saw a Linksys router in Walmart, I was like, whoa, now the normies have these to add internet onto your broadband. Like, now it has arrived.
Yeah, you're looking for Curry's. Curry's is where you're going to find all the stuff you need.
There you go. Next question.
Oh, sorry. John Preto, Las Vegas, USA. Any thoughts on last night's Tesla AI day?
John, what did you see?
Was I the only one that watched it last night? It was 3 hours long. Boy, is Elon just really clumsy on stage. Obviously, he does not rehearse, but it was super technical, deep dive on AI and the platforms that they're using. They're developing their own hardware platform, which is exaflop. You know, teraflops. They're exaflop in computing power, and they have 3 million cars. They're creating exabytes worth of data that feeds back into the AI loop. It's spectacular, the stuff that they went over last night. Their team was very well rehearsed. Elon was not rehearsed, but then they did a giant Q&A session on the conclusion of the show. It was super informative.
I did catch it, and their production is coming. It's coming along a little bit. Alex,
you know what?
What do you think?
What they did that really bothered me, Alex? This is really interesting. Their camera shot of the wide was right in the hallway where people were walking right in front of the camera. It was really uncomfortable.
They only had one. I noticed that too, John. They only had one wide shot. So people were leaving and walking in front of it, and it just was not well thought out. In fact, they had some of their presentations required that they show what was on their LED behind them, and it required that they watch people walk out in the middle of the frame. Alex?
That's just a function of how high the riser is. You know, like it's just you can put it in the back. You can frame the stage. We used to always frame the stage without any of the people in it, just to make sure that we didn't have to deal with that. So we wanted that riser to be pretty high, and we'd figure out where that riser was. And a lot of it was a function of how big the stage was. If we caught the crowd, we usually tried to keep it in the first 10 rows because they're the least likely to leave. So people who sit in the back are the ones that you don't want anybody after the first 10 rows to be in the frame if you can avoid it, and you walk under those cameras and make sure. And sometimes those risers are pretty high. I mean, we get those up to 6 feet, 10 feet high if we have to, so that we get an angle that doesn't include people. I mean, typically the risers are 3 feet, but we might continue to move them up if we need to get them out of the way so that we're not encumbered by. But that's just it's a little. I will say that Tesla and SpaceX are notoriously bad productions. I mean, they're getting a little bit better. But it's just like it is. It's just amateur hour. Everything that they do, I watch it, and I have to admit it. I usually have to turn it off because they make me so upset from a production perspective that I can't hear anything that they're saying because I'm just so frustrated by the bad production. And I think that what's interesting about it is I think that when Elon Musk gets on a roll, it's just gold, but that he's super uncomfortable in front of all those folks, and he's kind of stuttering along, and he's much better. We did an event with him, I've mentioned it in the past, with he and Richard Branson, and both of them are not super comfortable in front of lots of people. And we just had the two of them talking about entrepreneurship. You can find it. It's like Google entrepreneurship or something like that. You can find the conversation. Quality is very low. The video was very low, but it was an incredible conversation. And the first 10 minutes was uncomfortable. And then they just kind of locked into it and started having a great conversation and some real nuggets there, And I think that environment is way better when we talk about hybrid events versus whatever. For someone like Elon Musk or Richard Branson, a digital first event where they're in a studio and there's nobody there, and they they can just answer questions the way we do here, they're much better off. They're not good at speeches. What they're good at is responses, to what people are asking.
Elon killed the Q&A, just killed it.
No, he's always good in that environment, and that's all he should do. Like, they just have their guys up there that they can present whatever they want to present, and then let him just answer questions because he knows all the content. Like, he knows what to say, but having him package it up, and this is the thing, this is the mistake that people make, is they take people who know what to say and then they ask them to do a speech, and that's just it's a different mind, and you can have other people do the speeches. Like, that's one thing we learned, is you can have other people do those. You don't need to have the person who knows it. You have the person who knows it do the Q&A. And so I think that they're misusing him, and the production's low. But the information is great, and so, they could easily repackage that into something that was much more palatable for everybody and much more inspiring. And it's unfortunate that they don't do more in that area.
Yeah, I will say that the graphics and the presentations were, as usual, fantastic. All the visualizations that they use, you could tell that the other presenters had rehearsed and they had things pretty well. Good.
But again, like, a low camera is like amateur hour. Like that's not something that's not a pro secret or secret sauce or anything else. That's what everybody does that's done a production more than 10 times. It's not like, that's not it's just really not acceptable.
I mean, that's not even asking for a jib to fly around, but
right.
Yeah. And I will say though that Elon is getting more focused on his production values, because he was schooling everyone about how to hold a microphone. There was like 3 of them. And he's like, hold it close, hold it closer to you. So someone must have been coaching Elon, like, hey, we need better signal and noise in this.
Yeah, finally. That's why we give people headsets, by the way. That's why we give you see a lot of folks with headsets, is because they're not good at keeping their mic where it needs to be. So we're like, we'll just put it somewhere you can't move it. So.
Absolutely. Next question.
Next question comes from Tlaloc Lopez Waterman, coming to us from Knoxville, Tennessee this time. Has anyone used Blackmagic Design Cloud? What's the best way to use it for a project cost-wise? Alex?
I mean, I think that we haven't used it yet, but I think that we're definitely looking at testing it. If there's the initial investment, I think that using the small devices that they have, and then having one of the smaller central location, one of the smaller servers that they make, but you just have to have a location that has a ton of bandwidth to make that work. Now, you can put it in the cloud as well. We haven't tested it enough to do that. I have to admit that it's a brand new product, and we wanted to let it kind of sift itself out a little bit. But we have talked to a couple folks that are really happy with it. So we have a project that we may put it into, but we're still trying to figure out whether that makes sense for this one or the next one. But we definitely think that if you and it's something I'd like to pick office hour projects into for us to test. So stay tuned for that. If you're interested in that, let me know, and we'll put more energy to it.
All right, fantastic. Let's go to our next question.
Our next question comes from Johnny SDS in Manila, Philippines. Meetup groups in the Philippine tech communities are returning to in-person events, which has led me to host our first hybrid event since COVID. I'm looking for a wireless handheld mic system for these events. Any recommendations?
Go ahead, Alex.
Of course, it just depends on the size of your event. I will admit that, and I think that Mickey may have some other examples, and Mickey's nearby, so you have someone who you can talk to there. But I when I do any major event in front of any number of people, the only mics that I use are Axions. So Shure Axions. I mean, that's the when I'm doing it. I mean, for corporate, I mean, there's obviously we use Electrosonics for more in location stuff, that type of thing. But Axions are our core. Now, Shure makes I think it's the ULXD that's one step below that, and those have worked really well. And I used to own those. I didn't own the Axions, but anytime it mattered, I just rented Axions for that. And the price per channel on the Axions has dropped dramatically since I was ordering them, and they're actually better for less money. So those are the ones that I would recommend.
All right, and I was waiting for Mickey to weigh in the chat. He says,
Shure, Mickey, yeah, there you go. Go ahead.
Shure QLXD, ULXD, or Axient. So there you go. Next question.
Next question comes from Ike Potter. Rogue Amoeba's anniversary sales theoretically should have ended yesterday, but are still valid. Did anyone or you, Josh, get on it? Or are other apps like Sounddesk more attractive? And if so, why, Josh?
Aha. Peter?
So I've been a Rogue Amoeba user for most of their stuffs for about 3 years. And the one app that I use a lot, oddly enough, is Faringo as a sound effect board, because I couldn't figure out how to do it any other way. And it just runs on my Mac. It just runs away. And so Faringo, audio hijack, and loopback, you can inject all sorts of interesting sound effects.
Yeah, and I will say that I did grab it. I grabbed it yesterday just to make sure that I got the 20% off. I don't think, I will say that they did offer the package discount. So they had the podcasters package and then the full package you can get. And I don't, but the way things were, you actually could just piecemeal. You could actually buy the ones that you wanted because they were all 20% off. And if you group them up, they just had the 20% additive to it. So the unique thing about that sale was that you could piecemeal, get the ones you want. I wound up getting the podcasters one. I forwent the other sound source. I decided to go against. Maybe I'll pick it up later, but mostly what I'm interested in is hijack and loopback. I may actually use Fargo for some play out. So Peter, maybe I'll catch up notes for you. Mitchell?
Yeah, I really want that Faringo, but as a former morning show radio host, having a soundboard and me on office hours will be extremely dangerous. So I'll forgo.
Peter?
I actually use on my laptop, I use SoundSource because I found it when I'm traveling, it's quick to be able to just, I want this, I don't want any sound coming out of this application ever, ever, ever. And it will control sound from specific applications. This was useful back before. I mean, you didn't always used to be able to mute tabs in Safari, but it would do that. But SoundSource would, earlier versions of SoundSource would do that. And that's why I picked up SoundSource. So it's a use case kind of thing. It doesn't live on my main machine, but it does live on my laptop for when I travel.
Yeah, and nice thing too is their individual license. So if you wanted to put SoundSource on one device, I've heard back that they don't work well. Audio hijack and loopback don't work well with SoundSource. So you probably want that as your all-in-one solution on the SoundSource.
Right.
All right, let's go to our next question.
Next question comes from Andre Dolly in Berlin. Would it be possible to record after-hours sessions like Andy's yesterday for us members who can't make it? Seems like a lot of reasonable information to save and watch later.
And
I meant to raise my hand there. So
Alex?
Yeah, we're not going to, we'll try to look at maybe times, and maybe the 3:00 time on Friday isn't the best one. We'll see what we can do. We're trying to make it more depending on who's coming for that. But what I will say is that it's just when we start bringing people on, we're not going to record and distribute those because it affects the conversation when we start to record it. Like it's a much less informal conversation when we start saying we're going to record this and then put it back out again. And so it's a detriment to the people that actually came to have it recorded. And so it's why we didn't do it for a long time with office hours. And I capitulated finally, but after hours is kind of in for the most part a safe place. We are putting some of the stuff in there, but when we bring in people from companies to be in office in after hours, we're not going to get into the habit of doing that. So when we do our labs, that's one thing. That are people who have volunteered to do it. They've agreed to it be recorded. It's a known environment. When we're doing Q&A with external companies, the chances of us recording them are very low.
Yeah, and when we, our team that pre-screens our second hour guests when they come, we're offering them the after hours link. So if they feel inclined, they can come and have that informal discussion with us, a little debrief after theirs if they have the time. Let's go to our next question.
Next question comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. Has anyone used the Amazon lockers for preposition and consumables while traveling for a show, cables, etc.? What were your experiences, good or bad?
Alex?
Really good. I've used them a lot. when you're on a show or you need to get something or you need to, we've done stuff, especially when you have multi-day setups and so on and so forth, you realize you missed something. Oftentimes the locker will have it the next day. The big thing you just want to pay attention to is access. When is that locker available? Because it's at some location, and so some of them there's a handful of lockers that are 24/7 depending on the location, but there's a lot of them that are specific. And then, you get a code, you go in there and it tells you what locker it is. It's been relatively easy. I still prefer to send things to usually a FedEx. Usually I have things FedEx to the FedEx. If I'm buying from Amazon, I put it in the locker, or I'll send it to a, the problem you get into now is that if you send it to Kinko's FedEx and you do a UPS to that, they don't want to accept it. So we often FedEx things to FedEx locations that we can get to. I mean, sometimes we send them to the hotels as well. I have, if you go look at my Amazon account, I probably have 20 hotels like in my address book because of things that we needed to have delivered there. So the hotel works just as well.
I have to admit, I've never used them. I wonder if this would help our previous question. Ernest Floyd asked if he wanted to get something from an electronics store and obviously needed it shipped.
Sometimes you need to figure things out. And Currys is basically, in the UK, Currys is basically the Best Buy. Like it's just like going to Best Buy, except it's in London. So it's a pretty, if you're looking for the kind of stuff that was listed there, I'd probably just go there and get it sorted out so you can see it. Things are a little different there sometimes. So I wouldn't order things I always go places in other countries to see what I'm looking at. And then you're also going to find in London, there's lots of little electronic. Currys is like the big one that you can just go find stuff at. There's lots of little ones that are actually pretty good as well. Smaller ones that you'll see on some of the larger thoroughfares that you can grab. And I don't know how well the locker works overseas. I mean, I just know how it works in the US.
Okay. Thank you. And next question.
Next question comes from Deborah Woodfork in Washington, D.C. Looking for software recommendations to take survey data highlights to create a short animated video for LinkedIn. Dave.
Well, I guess I was wondering what the survey data highlights would be and how they would be gathered, and if the data is amenable to a spreadsheet. I think Keynote is really good for visualizing that and looking at the relationships and setting up parameters. And Keynote will export to video, so you could put your show in a movie, and then I don't know if it's acceptable on LinkedIn, but you can probably start there in constructing it.
And Alex?
Yeah, Keynote would be the first place that I went, or if I haven't done this a lot. There are some companies, there's some plugins that are available, and I just couldn't find them before we got to this question, that are both for After Effects and Motion that are built to visualize this content. You may want to look at Motion VFX if you're using an Apple and you want to use it in Motion. There are some great ones there, but I do believe there's some After Effects plugins too that are really designed to take all this data and present it out for you as a production. I just can't remember. I haven't had to do it in a long time, but we used to use something in After Effects that would do it. And then I've definitely, we talked about this in another previous episode about a great plugin that for Motion, I think that will do all that data visualization. I think it's in Motion VFX, so you can find the plugin there. But the first place that I would go is Keynote or PowerPoint if you're on a PC.
All right, next question.
Next question comes from Tolok Lopez Waterman. What are your favorite content sharing cloud services for video production? Frame.io, Dropbox, Vimeo? The limited space on Frame.io was a surprise for me. Or do you just keep adding 250 gigabytes for $15 a month?
Alex, what do you do?
Frame.io. I just keep on making it bigger if I need it. And then I make it smaller. So one thing you want to do is you want to be aggressive about it. When a project's done, you throw it into the archive or you take it off a frame. So you can, archiving it is much less expensive and it just takes longer to get it back. So it's still there. It's not gone, but it's a much less expensive way to go. So instead of $15 every 250 gigs, I think it's like $10 a terabyte or $10. It's like not very much to keep it there. So this is where in Frame, it's important to build projects. So you build separate projects because you can't just grab a folder and say archive it. You have to archive the project. So you build the project out and then you When you're done with it, you archive it. And that means if you need to get it back it'll take a day to get it back. It's like Glacier, like it takes some time to pull it back out again. It's maybe not a day, but a couple hours. Whereas you have real time that you're paying a lot of money for, or not a lot, but you are paying the money for it. The thing about Frame is that it's so flexible and so fast. So Dropbox is notoriously slow at times about downloading and uploading, and ingress and egress is just really painful, and the whole form, the way it works with media and everything else is, it also has file size limits. I mean, I've thrown things into Frame that are 900 gigs. Like I just put it up and leave it overnight and come back. It's all there, And so Frame is a lot easier. It's a lot more scalable. You have a lot more control. I share the stuff so what I do is if we're working on stuff, the core people are collaborators, and so they get emails every time I put something up, so they already know it's there. I build folder structures that are really easy to manage. So like I'll have a project and then I'll have, here are the stills, here are the videos, here's the audio, here's these bits and pieces, and my collaborators can go in there and team members can go in there and grab stuff. But I can also send individual links to my clients and go, here's the file that you're looking for. And they don't see all the rest of it. They just get the thing that they need. And I can decide whether they can download it or not download it. I can also decide whether it's a presentation format or whether it's a feedback format. And one of the big things is we use it for feedback. That's what it was designed for originally. We throw it up there. We don't want you to email us a list of what you want to change. Just go to Frame, download it. My mother still uses a flip phone, but when I did a video project for her, she got up on Frame and put her comments in. So it's not hard to use. So it's a really easy way to get feedback from the clients.
And Mitchell?
I have a little bit of a predicament. I work with a lot of pharmaceutical companies and development of stuff, and the NDAs absolutely forbid me from using any of those before or after the project, believe it or not. So I have to air gap the editing system and the compositing system, and I use FedEx. So as good as FedEx is, that's the only way I'm able to share product with them.
You wouldn't believe the bandwidth of a fully stocked FedEx street.
Someone asked me that. I said we were doing a project where we were having some folks in Zimbabwe work on parts of it, and they were like, "So what kind of bandwidth are you getting for FedEx?" And I was like, about 4 terabytes every 2 days. So that's about the maximum bandwidth we have.
Fantastic. All right, let's go to our next question.
Todd Worley in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Been pounding my head against the wall for hours, coming up with a question that hasn't been asked before. What do all the pro voice folks use to minimize mouth noises before recording besides water? Lozenges, rinses, bloodletting, poultice?
We'll try a poultice there if you get desperate. Dave?
Yeah, I usually sacrifice the chicken before I start, but that's all right. It's all about the training of the voice, and you get training. You can get it from colleges and schools and broadcast schools and that sort of thing. But I guess for me, it wasn't so much mouth noises as breathing. I had to learn not to do the intake breath between sentences and ruin the recording. I think what you're talking about is probably just a case of practice. You get used to speaking, and then your mouth noises fit what you're saying. And if you're having trouble with the flapping lips or the clicking of the tongue, well, then you just train yourself out of it. I'm sure Mitchell's got some great ideas on that.
Yes, Mitchell, you're well-traveled in the voiceover route. What do you do?
My first advice to Todd is to stop hitting his head on the wall. That certainly clears things out a little bit. When you're done doing that, as Dave suggests, there is some mic techniques and things you can do to reduce the noise, but the best place to reduce it is before you record. A little hot tea and honey go a long way to making it smoother on your vocal cords. And the other thing, avoid dairy products. Don't eat a donut or anything like that before you do your recording, because then you get that sound. Or if you're hungry, you might be drooling a little bit, anticipating DoorDash making a delivery. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but the best way is to avoid it in the first place.
Yeah, and I guess I'd add just a practical thing. If you coordinate your hygiene so that you brush before you have your speaking event, it does make a difference. So hopefully that helps you out. Let's go to our next question.
Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. What is the best solution for storage of House of Worship Zoom recordings?
Mark?
So, Tony, there's a couple different systems that we use. We use this Qlab system because it's Thunderbolt, so I can connect it directly to a Mac. It also has 10 gigabit Ethernet on the back, and I can connect to PCs on it. It's a nice system. It's a little bit expensive, but one of the ways you can save money is by filling it with the mechanical drives, as you can see the spaces for there, and then using SSDs and M.2s and creating smaller RAIDs out of that for cache to speed up everything. But there's lots of devices like this. I know a lot of people here like the Synology. I haven't used that one much. And then OWC, we have a bunch of these where they use software RAID, and you just put your drives into it. You buy a license for the software RAID. It's probably the most economical, and it's actually one of the fastest I found.
Very good. So you want to pull them down to use those solutions. Tony and Alex?
Yeah, I think that there's two things. One, what access do you want? Are you making these so that they're available for people to watch, or just storage? I think, if you're looking at making these available for people to watch, I'd probably look at Vimeo. Vimeo is a pretty good solution for that. You can put them on YouTube as well, but Vimeo, if you want to have some kind of controlled gate access to make that available, it'll store them up there as well as making them available. The problem when you put them on YouTube, which I don't think you can get the original back, but you can with Vimeo. The quality, the size is not going to be very large. You could probably get a single drive and put a year's worth of stuff on it. So just know that, the RAIDs are great if you're doing it. If you're only doing Zoom records, you probably won't need a RAID. You could probably get a 4 terabyte drive and it would probably hold everything. You get 2 of them, put it on one on each one and one in Vimeo, or one in the cloud, and then keep those drives separate, like separate buildings. And that's about as secure as you could make that you need for that to work.
All right, let's go to our next question.
Tam Greenwood, Toronto, Canada. What's a good way to limit the volume to speakers downstream of the mixer?
Alex?
Yeah, we'll see if Mickey throws something in here specifically, but generally what you want to do is make sure that you're able to manage those buses separately. So basically you have, if you're doing this, I'm assuming what you're talking about is streaming, and it has to go to the stream, go to the mixer. You need individual pot control, individual ways to control the what's going out. So from the mixer. So you don't want to have it be just one volume that controls everything. You need to have those things route out so that you can have individual control over these in the individual buses.
And I wonder if the speakers might have an adjustment on themselves that would be downstream of the mixer.
I'm not sure. I was thinking of amplified speakers, not the speakers. So that's, so that if it is, you're absolutely right that you want to have control. A lot of things that you have might possibly in their earpieces, are going to have a control, that you can attenuate. So you're not just sending something out to their headset. You're sending it to a little preamp that's going to, or some kind of amplifier. Oftentimes, I think that Behringer makes one that's really inexpensive that works great. It's like I think it's called the P1 or the P2. It's got an XLR in. It's got a little control on it. It's got an 1/8 inch out, and it works great. And you just attach them to the bottom of the desk. There's a better one that is used by a lot of broadcasters, but I can't think of the name of it at the moment.
Okay.
Angry Audio.
Does Angry Audio make one? That's not the one I was thinking of, but
yes.
Do they make one? There you go, Angry Audio.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking maybe Sam, if Sam's asking this, maybe he doesn't have any adjustment on the speakers or monitors. Dave, do you have anything to offer?
Well, I take this question to be a PA question rather than the addressing an audience kind of view. I think with any PA system, you have an amplified system for the speakers because mixers don't generally generate speaker level power. So the level control at the power amps that are driving the speakers is where you can limit the loudness. You virtually turn them right down to 0, and the mixer just, whatever you're mixing doesn't come out the speakers. So that is the level that your audience would be hearing, is through that power amplifier level, and not so much the mix itself. But of course, the maximum on that level may find that when you're mixing, some things are too soft or too quiet. So you need someone who understands both sides of that chain. I think Alex started there, but then we flipped it over to speakers who were standing on stage.
There you go. We gave you a couple of different angles then, Sam. All right. And as we go to our next question, we'll have to pick up the pace a little bit. We have a little shorter section so that we can do our transition to get our educators in for our second hour. So we're going to pick up the pace a little bit in answering your questions. Next question.
Another question from Solok. When sharing a 2-camera shoot with collaborators, is creating a rough cut the standard way to share it, or do you share the ISOs?
Mitchell.
Yeah, it really depends on the kind of collaboration you're talking about here, Talalik. It's I'm just going to assume that it's somebody that wants your camera originals for post-production. And I very rarely let camera originals or ISOs go out before I've finished and signed off on the project.
Alex?
Yeah, it takes way too long to manage. You definitely want to just send out an edit. So you do a rough edit from there and get feedback from. This is where we use things like Frame.io, and you just put it up there and let them make it. They know that the other angle is there potentially, but you want to make that adjustment first. If you send them 2 ISOs now, they have to figure that out, and most collaborators won't be able to do that efficiently.
Let's go to our next question.
Next question comes from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. He has a link for Avsono NDI audio converter. Thoughts on their new NDI tools and NDI audio router?
I'm looking at it now. Alex, did you get a chance to check that out?
Looks really interesting. I think we should reach out to them and get them on a second hour and have them talk to us about it. So that's a good second hour for a day.
That's a good question. In fact, we may have some NDI professionals next week. So stay tuned. Let's go to our next question.
Douglas Carmichael. How could you use VSD AudioUnit plugins to transport NDI to and from a DAW? And he has a link.
Let's see. Usually our audio guys are Tuesday.
I would ask that on a Tuesday, and especially as we're kind of cruising through things, I don't think we have an answer. This team doesn't have an answer for that one.
So put it back in Tuesday, Douglas. Yeah. Next question.
Next question from Talok. I have a bunch of footage in Dropbox. Is there a way to copy it to Frame.io, cloud to cloud?
Alex?
Not that I know of. And boy, would I love to. So the only way that I know, the most efficient way to do that is to put a computer on that you're going to share that Dropbox folder with the Dropbox folder that you have in the cloud, and they'll slowly pull everything out of it. Then move that out of that Dropbox folder into something else. Then delete your. So I'm in the process of doing this right now. I've had a bunch of dead ends. I have so much data on Dropbox from historically, and I'm trying to get it all out of there because I don't really like the platform anymore. So there's no. It's just very inconvenient. I can't find anything there, so anyway, so that's what I'm doing is doing that where I pair up a drive and then pull it all down, and then put it somewhere else. Yeah, it's a little bit of a process.
Next question.
David Brady in New York, just finished a week of training on BiAmp AV gear. While I do support Dante, the default interconnect is AVB, which handles both audio and video. Any insight into this protocol, which is IEEE certified over Dante and beyond?
Mitchell, real quick.
AVB is a very old protocol and sort of being replaced by things like Dante AV, which also does audio and video. So I'm concerned about how much time you would invest in an old protocol that's sort of on its way out.
Next question.
This question from Mitchell Hill, Wilmington, Delaware. What would be a reasonably priced soft key light for Ronny?
Go ahead, Peter.
I like the Elgato key lights. I have a pair of them that I'm using right now.
Asking for a friend, Mitchell? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I wasn't criticizing him, as that Ronny was asking, and I figured, well, I'll just put the question in and we'll concentrate on it. But I think he looks pretty darn good right now.
Yeah, looking good, Ronny. See, then you don't want to set too high a bar first time out. Then you can always improve later.
And Ronny, they're controllable through your Stream Deck as well.
All right, fantastic. Let's go to our next question.
Yeah, if anybody saw me setting up last night, it was camera. Anyway, Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana. Teamviewer has been my go-to for remote computer control for years. It's not great for controlling mobile devices. Anyone have a recommendation that works better?
And I would say Parsec. Parsec works great. They can get 10-bit color, very fast frequency. You can do H.265 encoding on there. I would give them a try. Let's go to our next question.
Next question, Douglas Carmichael. With IMAX showing that live concerts and theaters can be marketable, could you see live console manufacturers bringing immersive mixing support as a standard feature of their consoles in the future?
And Alex?
Yes, please. That's all I got to say. Yes, please. We could really use better tools. We're experimenting with a bunch of stuff. I mean, I'm on my own. I mean, in office hours, we're experimenting with a bunch of stuff. And but yeah, it would be great to have more tools. That's all
Yes. We won't say no. And send those. Say it's those developers. You got to beg them for your features. Let's go to our final question.
Final question, Douglas Carmichael. Avsono has audio over NDI for transporting audio over the internet. What would be the advantages of SRT for said use case over NDI?
Go ahead, Alex.
I think SRT would be more stable to go from the ground to the cloud. So if you're going to push it into the up, I think you'd be better off with SRT than an NDI.
Yeah, agreed. And you have the buffer that you can build into your SRT feeds as well. All right. And we've just started our show. We're just going to go to our second half, which is our educators, which is our question and answer session. Every week, we have different presentation that's geared towards our educators. Today, we have Dave Trotman on that's going to be leading that discussion. Dave, what do you have for us today?
Well, back in the 1960s, people started imagining schools without teachers. Television and later videotape was going to usher in a brave new world of education tailored to students who were growing up watching television. Although teachers are never made obsolete by video and later interactive media, today we're seeing some really interesting applications of video. So we'll be discussing them right after we've had a chance to set things up. Stay with us while we make that shift change, and join us when Education Hour starts in just a few minutes. Oh, jeez, I keep grabbing that thing.
Can't hear you, sir.
Well, welcome, educators. Mr. Clark, Miss Graham.
Lovely to be here. I saw Dave's lips moving a minute ago, but heard no audio, so.
I was speaking on comms.
Oh, fine.
He's a reverse ventriloquist.
I don't want to miss anything.
A warning to the TD that I will be sharing a screen.
Aaron was with me in the green room, but didn't join the party yet. Let's see if that's a hiccup or whatever.
Oh, I'm right here, Chris.
Oh, great. Great. I can relax now. The real teacher in the building.
I'm very happy to see you here, Chris.
I think everyone needs to put their hand up on Mukana there. Yep, good. Thanks, Chris. Oh, you're, yeah, that's right. Josh is in, and Harshid will be there eventually. Ronnie will be reading.
And Harshid, you may have just gotten your ears in. If you want to put your hand up on the test question that's currently on deck. What do you got for us, Dave? Any nuggets for the
A little
privileged here?
slideshow to start things off.
Fantastic.
Should be clear, Josh.
And if we want to put our hands on for the test question, we'll be able to do our super source checks. And Ronnie, you're muted.
I'm talking to Mickey.
Copy.
Education Hour on Office Hours Global. In this hour, we explore some ideas in education and their practical application in other areas. But also we talk with educators themselves about some of the things that they're concerned about and the questions they have. So if you have questions, today's subject, of course, is video in the classroom. And we'll do a little historical background of that, and then we'll get into some questions. And hopefully you'll have a few in Mukana so that we can get into those. But I'll just start out by saying that the first time I watched TV at school was in a gymnasium. The teachers were fussing with rabbit ears on two big TVs on top of a tall stand. And clearly no one knew whether this would work, but it did. And we all watched John Glenn do 3 orbits. After that, school was over. I'm going to share a slide deck here, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. We'll see in a second. There we go. So this was sort of what I had when I first started to see television at school. I'm just waiting for the image to come up here. Okay. My second slide isn't showing, so that's why I'm waiting a second here. All right. Is this working for everyone?
We still see your first slide.
Right.
Okay. Still trying to get that second slide up. Okay. Gonna stop the share for a second and work on a different way of doing this. And if it doesn't share, I'll just keep on going here.
If you like, Dave, we could go around to the panel and see who's here for our education representatives while you're preparing it.
We could just talk through this as well.
Yeah, you can.
We don't have to deal with the slides.
Yeah. Wouldn't probably surprise anyone that when I was in high school, I was the film projector guy that everybody discovered I was a filmmaker, and they realized I could thread a Bell & Howell projector in about 20 seconds, and so I got called out of classes to go run films for other teachers, and I got to see quite a lot of what was considered at the time, educational material. And these were like chemistry labs and physics and biology, and I think I even did a phys ed film for somebody. Later, of course, I got a chance, and my first full-time job was in a film library, which was essentially the place where all these films were distributed from. And you know how I used to say, don't rewind? Well, I was the guy who rewound it and fixed it if it had shattered, and edited it and cut them back together again. And then after that, I got working in educational television and started making video for professors at the University of Alberta. We made CD-ROMs, Laserdiscs, DVDs eventually, and it moved from being just presentations in the classroom to interactive media, which then, of course, allowed the opportunity for students to interact directly with the material. I did a little work in video conferencing for a while, and tease people with the idea that once we got into video conferencing, teachers wouldn't really need a classroom. They just have a whole bunch of students. I never thought that maybe, 15 years later, we were going to have a situation where COVID made that a reality. But I wanted to talk to people about their particular use of video in the classroom, if they've ever tried it, and also if they have any ideas about how it can be applied and what things probably don't work on video in the classroom. I've often told people when talking about the internet, you can't really teach phys ed over the internet, but now with YouTube, I think you can. So the prospects have changed. The context in which we're teaching is changing. Teachers are getting more sophisticated with equipment. It's not a snake pit of cables and a whole bunch of 4 or 5 remotes and that sort of stuff. They're not having to see, instruction cards that show you how everything works and what how to make everything fit together and use it. So I'll start with just asking, what sort of things have you used video conferencing, video itself in the classroom, and maybe in the future interactive video? Alex?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've used it a fair bit. So for video in the classroom, and we've been using it. I've been using it on and off for the last 20 years. So we really started in a couple different ways. So one of the things that I learned early on was that it was the advantage of video to talk about technical concepts is that the kids who, and when I say kids, I would say kids of all ages. I've taught, my students have been everywhere from about 8 years old to about 80. So there's been a wide range, but they're all, people think that they're different. They're generally all the same, except for the ones that are 8 years old. will pick up faster than everybody else. So they can learn. I mean, when I teach visual effects to college students and visual effects to 8-year-olds, I teach it exactly the same way with the exact same concepts. And the only difference is, as the 8-year-olds are less confused and move faster. And so the thing that I found that was useful. Well, a couple different ways that we use video. One is that flipping the classroom or asymmetrical training is really, really powerful in the sense that I don't really like to lecture. I lecture almost, for the last 20 years, I've done almost zero lecturing. So I give you the content before the classroom, and then I want to have a discussion. Then I want to work through things. Then I want to talk about things. I make the classroom as a lab. I will, and I start off if you've ever seen me speak live, I will always say the same thing. I'm not a very good speaker. I can't hold the ground for 45 minutes. What I need you to do is ask questions, or this will be a real short trip. It's usually some version of that.
You came from radio, so you could hold the.
Anyway, I set it up. I set up the conversation that way. That I want this to be a conversation. I don't want to, because as a classroom member, as soon as someone talks for very long, I'm not listening anymore, and so I need to have it be contextual and part of a conversation, and I need it to change pretty often internally. And I'm a little ADD, so that's part of me keeping my attention, and it needs to move, and so that I think has made it so, that process has been really powerful for us. So providing the videos, and we did this with Pixel Core because we didn't have any other choice. We couldn't use video. We couldn't stream video. We couldn't have classes. We had 2,000 people in 40 countries. So everything was a video. We put up videos, and then we had long discussions and challenges for people to do stuff. So we challenge people to do things. Here's the video on how to do it. Go out and do it. And now let's have a conversation. So after you've had practical, you've rammed up against the wall, because the real problem really is you're not really ready for the information until you have the question. Until you're interested, until you failed, that failure creates gaps that we can now fill with knowledge. So it's really important to get people to, here's an introduction and here's how to use that. Most of what I've done in general has been, I'm going to give you videos. They're usually short. They're between 2 and 5 minutes long. And I'm going to, at the most, really complex step-by-step procedures for you might be 20 minutes long, but they're all built as a step. Each, there might be 30 steps in it, and each step is only a couple minutes long. And we found that was incredibly powerful combined with then a conversation. So a conversation with the educator, but that's a much more interesting class than someone lecturing. And the other thing that we found is that we wanted to scale the classroom because at 15 or 30, when you do what I'm talking about, at 15 to 30, you actually you don't have enough people to reach critical mass for the questions. So not everyone will have the right questions. Once you reach about 80 to 100 people, they will always ask the right questions. And I know that sounds like a crazy thing to say, but 80 to 100 people that are interested in this guarantees the correct questions will be asked every single classroom. Mm-hmm. And when you get to about 200, 200 is about the maximum efficiency. Then then you have other problems after about between 2 and 500 students. You have additional logistical problems, too many questions, right? And that's what Mukana has been built to manage, is up to thousands. But the issue is that what happens as a teacher is now you're getting all the right questions that allow you to work through the rest of the content, that you want to do. And so that's why, and then to put that in perspective, that's why we also use video to run the classes, before it was Hangouts and now it's Zoom, because we can scale that classroom up, and we can have lots of people part of that conversation, as opposed to it. So those are some of the places that we've used video for what we've done.
Mm-hmm. Aaron?
Hi there.
Do you have experience there?
Of course. So I teach third grade, and so I'm working with those 8 to 9-year-olds, Alex, that you worked with, and they do catch on very quickly. They really do. In fact, actually, one of the games that we play, there's no reading directions on the screen at all. They just have to push buttons and break things, and then they figure it out. So for videos in the classroom, when I taught remote 2 years ago, I thought it was the best tool for students to use in terms of flipping the classroom, because what I could do is assign 2 groups a video, whether I made it or from YouTube, about what the lesson was going to be about. And I knew it was going to be roughly about 5 minutes. So then I would talk to another group, teach the lesson in 5 minutes, then show them the video, while I went to the other groups and did the lesson with them. So that way all the groups got both a visual and audio from a teacher and a visual and audio from a video. So now that I'm in the classroom physically, I assign it as homework in terms of flipped classroom. So for homework every night, my students have about maybe 3 videos at max, but like Alex said, it's about 2 to 5 minutes at most. And it'll either tell a story or review what we're going to do in class the next day. And then they get to play a little game to reinforce those skills. So all over, video can be used in such amazing ways. The only thing I would say not to use video for is if you're going to show more than a 5-minute video in class. That should be more of something, like Alex said, you do a breakdown of it, like maybe like one chapter of a story versus the 3 or 4 you would read in class. Because if you're doing a read aloud in class, whether it's a chapter book or a picture book, you're interacting with them. You know, you're talking with them, you're getting feedback immediately. But if you want them just to review or comprehend or listen to the chapter again for comprehension purposes, then a quick 5-minute video, I think, would be perfectly appropriate.
The thing about the shorter video is, of course, that they can repeat it without burning up another 20 minutes. If it's only 3 or 4 minutes long and it covers all the points, but it goes rather quickly, then the repeated viewing allows them to see it differently on each review.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I have had a couple of parents in the past couple of years approach me and say one of 2 things. Either, thank you so much for the videos for homework because my kid didn't get it, so we watched it 5 or 6 times. Mm-hmm. And then another parent would say to me, thank you so much for the videos. My child understood it and watched it at 2 times the speed, got it done faster, and was able to do things with the family after because they weren't, trying to like finish up a worksheet. They were watching a video and interacting with it.
Yeah. And Chris.
Good morning. My story about the use of video is a very short story in the sense that most of the subjects I've taught over my career are invisible processes, learning and thinking like a researcher. So my thinking was that video doesn't lend itself to depicting the invisible. So to accomplish what Alex and Dave and others have described as setting up a conversation, generating genuine questions so that the face-to-face time will be a productive, authentic conversation, I take a different approach, which is for each of the participants not to read a chapter in a textbook or other source, but to write a story about their own experience with the big idea. For example, in a course on adolescent development that I taught for many years at Michigan State, I provided a framework of big ideas that relate to adolescent development and on which distinguished researchers and theorists have written. And also that each of my students have had some experience with because they are graduates themselves of adolescence. These were graduate students. So in week 2, for example, they would write a 2-page story about their experience with identity. What is your name? What is the origin of your name? Who does it connect you with in the canon of the saints or the family tree of your mother's family or your father's
Cultural
family?
heritage. Yeah.
So everybody has a name or several names. And often my students were from many different cultures. So there's an enrichment and a connection that they have great expertise with, and therefore can tell a story that none of us can contradict. We simply are receiving their version of who I am, how I dealt with my identity shifting during my own adolescence.
Right.
When I remembered, when I renamed myself or told people how I would like to be addressed, which may not be the same name as I had when I was an 8-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And so the aim is the same as providing a video that illustrates something visualizable, and the generation of authentic conversation and really fascination with the big idea and their own story works beautifully in those situations. And it also cultivates a sense of a learning community where we're getting to know one another at a deeper level, and therefore
we share the knowledge. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my story. Just one other comment, which is that when back in the day, when a faculty member would show a movie or show a video, that was a kind of a not so subtle signal to turn off for the students. This is a time filler rather than an integral and constructive part of the syllabus. So
there's popular memes today where people say, when I saw the cart being rolled into the classroom, I knew it was going to be an easy day and we weren't really going to get a lot accomplished or whatever. And
so we have to work against that prejudice.
Had you ever thought of using animation to get some of these concepts visualized, though? I mean, I've come across this myself where we had to demonstrate the gas laws, which are the physics of gases. And you can't see most gases, so how do you show some of these concepts? And we had to resort, and it was delightful to resort to animation to show what can't be seen and to visualize it in ways that are cartoonish, perhaps, but get across the concepts. So for identity, for instance, it might be possible to visualize some of the larger big picture ideas and then do your conversation with individuals about their development.
Sounds like a great idea. I never have thought of it or tried it, but it brings up another issue, which is quote unquote ordinary teachers often do not have the support system, the animation guru to create the kind of demonstration that you're describing. Except in universities where, and this is probably universal by now, where an online teaching unit has been established, so that online degrees and online courses are now joint productions of the professor and a team of experts who can add animation and can illustrate things and so forth. And
well, the larger institutions now have production centers. So yes,
exactly.
That's what's come along. Yeah. Alex again?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing to underline is the power of the video is that I think I mentioned this before, but we just want to keep on reminding it that by producing all the content in either audio or video form, the advanced students can listen to it very quickly and glean the information that they need, and the slower students in that subject, doesn't mean that they're slow, they just need more time, can replay it. They can replay a single piece, they can replay, and if you run that through data, so if you just give them the videos, it's one thing. If you give them the videos through a player that will measure data, what's really fascinating about it, as we started to build some learning stuff, this was probably 15 years ago, we could see in the video, you'd see this. You'd see, well, this is people jumping onto a video to look at it, and you'd see this huge drop, and then you'd see this, 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 and it would go out. It was like a little heartbeat. When we looked at this data, what this meant was they got to the video and it wasn't what they expected. So let's say this is 0. There's a whole bunch of people showed up. This isn't what they wanted. They dropped out. But what was most interesting is that if we went to the time frames in these areas here, what we noticed was that there was something confusing about what we said. So we weren't as clear as we could be in these areas, or there was something right before it that set up, if we very critically looked at the video, we could understand that a lot of people are stopping and rewinding here because there was something wasn't enunciated as well as it could have been. Something wasn't illustrated as well as it could have been. And so what it allowed us to do is analyze it, and we would rebuild the videos to work on these, to knock these down. So a lot of times we'd re-record videos, and then we'd find that, oh, now it's only a little bit of a jump, or now it's a new jump somewhere else sometimes. But when you get that data back, and this is where I think as we move to a more video form, if you have players that are actually paying attention to how students are using it, we can get a sense of what is happening. Also, you can get a sense of what kind of student the student is based on, are they replaying it a bunch of times, or are they listening to it once really fast? And you can probably start to correlate that with the kind of student they are like they may just get it and they understand it. And now you know that someone who's repeating it a lot, it's not a problem. You may want to just go and see how they're doing, because they're repeating this video a lot. They're having a hard time understanding what's happening there. One of the things that we started to work on to fix the problem with teachers don't have enough time to build these animations. I don't have enough time to build these animations. And I know how I worked on Star Wars, it's not, you can't expect the teachers to sit there and build tons of animations to do this stuff. And so what we started to do is we worked with a charter school that's no longer in existence, but we had a charter school, and I've talked about this in the past, where we built teams inside the student body. So they're learning media production and what they're doing, but their goal was not to just build some plan or something else. It was to work with the teachers. The teachers had an idea of something they'd love to have visualized. The students would tell them, and the teacher we were given the teacher's budget. The department had a budget. So they had a budget of $1 million or whatever. We just made it up, $1 million for each department that they could spend. And the students would meet with them, and they'd look at how many hours and everything else. And they say, well, that's going to cost, $33,000 for us to do from that budget. And so the teachers could come up with a bunch of things, and the students would go do them. Teachers ended up with animations that again, when you make those animations, those are evergreen. You can use them for the next 10 years, for a lot of these concepts. And the students were learning key things. And what was important is that students building their own projects is not nearly as valuable as working for a client, because the client is not practical. The client is not, they just want what they want, right? And so the teachers would look at it, would drive the students crazy, because the teachers would be like, well, I really wanted to bounce a little bit more when it got to the end here, and I really wish it did this. And the students would have to talk about the fact.
That was too quick, or this is too slow, yes.
And then we had to talk to students about what change orders are and how things get more expensive when you ask for more things and everything else. But what was interesting is that there was this creative experience between the teachers and because now the teachers, what happens is the teachers can't think of how to explain the visible, explain the invisible until they start seeing it get explained, and then their brain just starts going, oh, now I get it. We couldn't. One of the illustrations.
Same thing the students are going through when they watch it is, now I get it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and now they understand why it's important, and then they get excited about it, and then they get the biggest challenge was the teachers got so excited about it, they asked for so many things, the students couldn't do it, and so you had to kind of manage what happened, because suddenly they had this outlet that they could use. Yeah. Now, this was 15 years ago when they still had to play them from DVDs, and it was very, it was very complicated.
Frame and
it was just it was still a hard thing, because a lot of the classrooms weren't really set up for it. We did get a Mac in there, and they were able to play some of the stuff, but it was just very painful. Using this thing called, we were in the early days, we were using Director, and then we were using another software that doesn't exist anymore to play it out. And so, but the thing is that being able to, the big problem with video, and we get back into that, what really works is interactive video. And what I mean by that is that the teacher has a whole bunch of things they could show. This is when I do talks, when I do trainings, I have a bunch of things I can show, and then I have a handful of things that I'm going to show. And that's going to be a very small list. But then I have all this other stuff that's randomly accessible and available. And that's why I have the telestrator, is because what I can do is I can show you a video, and I can draw on it, and I can talk about it. And
highlight
so
things,
the video is still part of the conversation. It's not a stop of the conversation. It's like someone asks a question, and I go, I got an answer for it.
Augmenting it, yes.
And as you start to build all those videos, you end up with this huge collection. And, our vision of that was always that the school would eventually have this huge library that is randomly accessible that you could just search. The teacher goes, let me search for momentum, and there's like 5 videos on momentum, and they know which one they want to show.
One of those libraries, yeah.
And so it's, but I think that engaging the students' media school to produce some of the content, obviously reduces the cost of execution. But also, and it's something that we hope to show more of, but it was very effective, in what we did in the past, is to engage the students to be part of the process.
We're going to get Harshid in here, and there's some more questions popping in.
Sure. So I wanted to take us on a field trip to Universal Studios to an earthquake ride. In that ride, they start off with showing you a video of a cityscape, sort of like LA or whatnot. And then at the end, they lift the screens up and they show you the destruction that happened. But all it was a small set that was made out of almost cardboard and little pieces, miniatures. But what that really showed me in a way is when you take a video, even though you're on a Universal Studios ride, first, you're supposed to do the visual. Second, you were given the opportunity to be live on a make-believe stage, like you're walking up the mall stairs and then grips get to pull stuff and you get to, kind of make-believe earthquake. Then third is you ride the ride. And just imagining what videos portray to us, me explaining it about Universal Studios or what have you, the Terminator ride did something similar where before you came in, you watched a video and we started remembering phrases like Skynet and this, that, and the other. And those are memorable phrases, but even in education classrooms and such that watching videos about humanities, 20th century humanities, for example, we can't really depict that information, but videos and any kind of graphics will give you that implication of one, what was, and then two, what is, and then it gives you the opportunity to think for yourself to say, hey, okay, I saw what I saw, but maybe these materials aren't available at this time, but how can I reproduce something as effective? Because at the end of the day, movies are effective because we like them. It's the sound quality, it's the people, it's how we portray things. So teaching even kids at a young age to say what TV shows are, what movies really depict, and giving them the opportunity to say, well, if you want to do that, it's not far out of reach. So I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a back end of my end of what video would mean to me. Video really depicts what should be before and after. And it also gives you just a general sense of more information that you could really relate to a topic.
Thanks. Let's try a second question here.
Question comes in from Harshid in Daytona Beach, Florida. How does the sound quality impact a video in the environment we're discussing?
Go for it, Alex.
Critical. It's potentially more important than the visuals. So audio is the
80% is the audio and 20 is the video.
Yeah. So I mean, it's so important, and it's important that it's clear. And the reason that I'm particularly sensitive to it is because I listen to most videos. I run most videos at 1.75 to 2x the normal speed, and so when someone is not doesn't have a good enunciation, I have to slow down my intake. So I think that I've actually gotten to where I prefer Kindle's voice over a person because it's more accurate and I can listen to it at a higher speed. When it comes to, and I don't listen to fiction. I mean, people will say, "Well, that doesn't work in fiction." Well, I don't listen to fiction because it's a waste of time. So I'm just trying. I just want the protein, and so I'm usually it's some kind of informational book that I'm sucking as much information out of it as possible as fast as I can, so I can move to the next one. And so I find that I get very sensitive to who's doing it and the audio quality because it slows me down.
Absolutely, yeah. Aaron?
I'm going to completely agree with you, Alex. Everything is what I do as well, except for lately I've been listening to fiction at 2.5 times the speed.
Listening to fiction at 2.5 times the speed? Yeah, that would be hard.
Actually, so it's funny. I'll tell people that I think at my last count since January 1, I've listened to 76 books.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them are fiction. I would say 5 are nonfiction. But what's funny is that if there is an accent of the person reading it, I have to slow it down to 2.25 speed.
To resolve the accent, yes.
Exactly, because I'm trying to get all the little bits of it. But otherwise, I do listen as quickly as I can because I just want to get as much as possible.
The funny thing about it is that I actually can remember a lot more from a book at a higher rate, because when it's at regular rate, I actually put new thoughts between the words. So I'm thinking about new things and my mind wanders. At a high rate, and I also can't do very many complicated things listening at full rate. I can just walk around, but I can't really clean the way I would normally, or do other things because I need to pay attention. But I found that I actually could understand the string a lot better when it was at a faster speed than if it was at a lower speed, because I would add new things. I'd be thinking about other things. I'd wander off. I'd be gone.
I would say the same thing in terms of that, Alex, except for I do clean while I'm listening to things. But what
dishes are easy. You can do dishes at any speed.
And steaming the floors or sweeping like that I can handle. If it's like really complicated, I can't. But yeah, absolutely.
And you can train yourself to listen at 2 or 2.5 times speed. It just slowly
keep
becomes
on
more
ratcheting it up.
comprehensible. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Chris?
I wanted to say that there's a reason that there are a handful of frequently re-encountered narrators on series like David Attenborough's work, for example. He is a very distinctive speaker, of course, almost distractingly so, but for me, very engagingly so.
Yeah.
And there are others who are the narrators, the regular narrators of Ken Burns' documentaries, for example. And I always sort of lean in and smile when I hear the familiar voice of a master narrator. So I think there's even more going on than in interpretability. There's also a kind of a relational connection that certain particular voices and styles of delivery have that help maintain engagement. So it's back in my days of teaching at Michigan State and other universities. That was one of the weak links in the video playback systems that were provided in the classrooms and the seminar rooms and so forth.
Terrible audio. That's what
right. And if you couldn't hear, it only takes
more annoying than anything.
14 seconds for people to say, "Well, this isn't for me. I'm out of here mentally."
Yeah.
So at a very fundamental level, audio is critical, as everyone has said.
It always annoyed me when I saw one of my videos played in a lecture hall and you could not make out what was being said. I was just so upset. Yes, because I put all that work in, made that video for the guy, and then you can't hear it. And I just thought, terrible. One more from Alex.
Yeah, and while we're talking about audio, the other thing to remember is that a lot of the content can be delivered to students through audio only. So one of the things we did with Pixel Core is we had the precursor to actually office hours was an Ask Alex, which was people would just send in questions and I would go into a radio booth and I would answer once a week or sometimes twice a week. I would answer all the questions that were submitted and discuss them. And they were everything. It was kind of like the Sunday morning where it was things about Pixel Core or things about or just concepts that people wanted to talk about, but it was clearly a radio show, and it sometimes lasted between 45 minutes and 90 minutes. It's typically the range, and I would just answer a bunch of questions, and then people could just download that video and listen to it. And I think that with students, especially when you're thinking about concepts, you can just give that to them and let them walk around, do whatever they want to do, and get some of the class. And it's a lot actually easier. You'll find that the students can listen to it walking home from school much easier than they can sitting in the classroom and watching you do it in real time, even though it's the same content.
Mm-hmm. It's like a walking meditation at that point.
Exactly.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, in my opinion, the negative reputation video has with both teachers and students comes from the cognitive load from poorly produced content. Bad audio, bad video. What will it take to shift that reputation more broadly?
Training. No, better producers and more comprehensive understanding of what the delivery is about. But we'll go to Erin. She'll probably tell us a lot.
I'm hoping I read the question correctly. I think based on the previous question, it kind of goes hand in hand. If there's bad audio, even if it's something about, like, I love watching YouTube videos about Disney World. And if it's poor quality, either audio or video, I just say, nope, not worth it. Never mind. So if we give our students videos and content with clear graphics and clear audio. It's not muffled. It's not, that people aren't saying and like in between every single word. It's a lot more valuable to students.
They don't have to work at it. They can just relax and listen. Yeah.
Exactly. But you're also showing them that they're worth finding better quality or making better quality videos for.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Chris?
To respond to Douglas's final part of the question, what will it take to shift that reputation for video being not so engaging? I think we teachers, or those of us who are involved in designing courses and learning experiences, need to think of ourselves as curators and only provide the best. The best ingredients make the best food, for example, both from a nourishment point of view and an enjoyment point of view. And I think I've done that with readings that I assemble for a course, saying these 5 readings are inspiring and clear and generative of questions and conversations. They're the only ones that I will require you to read or devote time to discussion of, because they're so good. They're such accessible and engaging models. And we need to apply that same principle to our choice of video or audio. Any media should be the best available. And
to improve a student outcome, yeah.
Exactly. Well, just engagement, for it to get past the threshold of, shall I pay attention to this or not? A decision that's made in microseconds after tape rolls. So,
okay, Alex.
I think that it's important that we do what we're doing here, which is talk about it. I think that as people who are working technologists related to this, I think that it is important that teachers are given the proper equipment that they need to actually execute better video and audio to start with. Now, their phone has gotten to a point where it can do the video pretty well. And then the audio is just a matter of the environment, and in some cases, having a little additional material there. But one of the things that we just have to constantly get over is the idea that it's okay because everyone else is doing it a certain way, that it's okay for us. And I always, anytime someone says, well, that's what everybody's doing, all I think about is in Henry V, there is a point where where Llewellyn talks about people need to be quiet, like it's before the Battle of Agincourt, and Gower says, why? The enemy is loud, you can hear him all night, and Llewellyn says, if the enemy is and I can't say that word, and a fool and a prating coxcomb, which is the part of a rooster, is it meet, think you, that we should also be a fool and a prating coxcomb in your own conscience now? like you don't, just because somebody else is doing it badly doesn't mean that you should do it badly. That is completely unacceptable. And literally, if you ever say that the quality is lower because everyone else, it's okay for everyone else, just know that in my head, that quote just plays like a little tape, and you'll see. And sometimes I'll say it, if the enemy is a fool and a coxcomb, should we? So anyway, so I think that that's always the thing to think about, is we want to elevate ourselves. We always want to be looking at how do we elevate elevate the user experience, elevate our own ability.
I found in my work with professors, primarily because I didn't do much in elementary ed or anything, but professors would have the dubious feeling of, well, I'm getting too involved in this, you take care of it. And then when they saw the product and they realized what it could do, they were much more comfortable coming back to the idea a second time, because we were quite proud of making a good quality product that looked good, sounded good, and carried the information correctly at a right pace and all the rest. And it shifted them. The reputation for bad video disappeared. They suddenly realized you could make it.
Many people think that the information should hold itself. The information should be good enough that people will just pay attention. But the world is run by people who understand that presenting the information is what is important. like and how you present it. That's what runs the world is how you present the information. The information alone never has enough gumption to move anywhere.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Oh, sorry. Mike Muddy Schlegel from Raleigh, North Carolina. Are there subjects or topics or skills that lend themselves better to video?
Go ahead, Alex.
I would say that they're practical things are a little easier to do. Things that you can measure, you can show, you can, how to do something or how something works that you can actually shoot is a little bit easier. But some of the most valuable things are the invisible things that you can now make visible. When my older daughter was 10 years old, I said she was homeschooled, I asked her what she was learning what she was learning in class. And she said, I'm learning about string theory. And I was like, string theory at 10 years old? And she goes, yeah. And I said, well, explain it. And she said, well, if you go inside of an atom and inside of the molecule and then inside of the atom, and you'll see these strings of energy, and this ties together quantum mechanics and the Big Bang. And so she's talking through all this stuff. And I was like, where did you learn that? And she's like, Nova. Like she watched one Nova, and it was called The Invisible World. And they made those things visible. And so sometimes those things turn out really well, but we don't want to do it at the detriment of all the other things that we can use. So a lot of times when I build training for clients, we're building it in a couple different layers. So there is a layer of audio. I want you to be able to listen to this and just think about it. Sometimes those are discussions. Sometimes those are lectures. I have video. That is something that it's just easier for you to understand the 10,000-foot view of it or exactly how to move this thing. I know that when I was, I decided bread was a good thing to build training on. So I made 300 loaves of bread. But I started with this book, and the book talks about how to, you basically pinch the bread along. You can see me doing it right now because trying to describe that took a page and a half of trying to describe how to do it properly. And 3 minutes of video, by the same person who wrote the book on YouTube, I completely understood what he meant. Like I was like, oh, okay, that's that. It seemed really, really hard, and then it did not. And so the thing is that video can oftentimes shorten that attenuation really quickly. But text is really useful in list form and reference form to go back to. I don't want to watch the whole video to find out what's the next step and how much salt do I put in or whatever. I want that to be purely available to me. So it just depends on what you're doing there.
I did a 10-minute video for City Council explaining the process of coming to speak to City Council. They had such trouble with people coming and not knowing how you sign up and not knowing what the legal procedure is and when you can speak and how long and all that. And so we were asked to try it and make one of these things. And I decided to shoot it as a movie. But I also used children as the city councilors. So we had a child as mayor and 12 other people as the councilors. We gave all the kids a role to play. They all wore suits and ties. And we were kind of making fun that councilors are like children, so you have to explain things to them. But we had people come up and do presentations and walk through the whole procedure without having to narrate too much. And then we put this on their feed at the city hall, and they required you to watch this video before you signed up to speak. And it's helped them speed up the process, make presentations shorter, no wrangling with the councilors. It was a procedural thing that was easy to explain and better to show, rather than just have a list of things that you had to follow and people don't read it. They just sign up and come to council. So we'll go to Josh here.
Yeah, I would say a loose definition of video would be moving pictures or animations. I think the things that lend themselves to animations or pictures are things that you want to show the transition to back and forth. I was watching the Tesla experience yesterday, and when they wanted to show a concept, you're seeing it in their point of view. Of course, it's to be taken with with caution, because if you stay in that if you stay in that point of view, then you're limiting the discussion. But giving that perspective, forcing people into that perspective of seeing things, or showing things that like GIFs or animations that go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and you can see them. I think those are helpful. That go a little more than just a static illustration or describing it.
Yeah, and the invisible is anything that is too difficult to see. then it's nice to have video or macro shots of flowers and all the rest, and you can describe those things. Yeah. Chris?
I wanted to get back to Muddy Schlegel's question and say that my favorite topic or skill that lent itself beautifully to video consists of time-lapse videos of assembling a cedar strip canoe kit. So the challenge is you want the end product. The buyer wants this beautiful object, the end product, and they can afford to buy the kit. But then it takes months to complete. It takes the winter to build a canoe in your basement or workshop. And what I need to move the needle far enough for me to tackle this is to see that it can actually be done by a human being. Usually it's a highly qualified human being who's videotaped, who's done this more than once before, which brings us back to the principle of rehearsal.
Yeah.
The second time you build a canoe, it goes better than the first time, and so forth.
Yeah.
But that kind of multi-step process that involves wait time and use of tools that you may not be familiar with using can be very reassuring and helpful, and we can scroll back and forward to prepare ourselves for today's contribution to the completion of a longer project. So I think that's a wonderful example of a topic that, and of course the principles can be applied to many other things, but start with a canoe is my advice.
All right. Alex, quickly.
And I started with bread. Same thing, because I was like, 10,000 years ago, we figured out how to do it without any video training, but it would be really useful if we had some. I never actually made the video. Like, I should go back to do that. I got caught up in making the bread. What I will say is that for educators, you should also look at some of the best people in the world at doing this, which is YouTubers. So they have figured out how to explain some of this stuff in incredible detail. The ones that I would particularly look at, if you're into technology, there's of course Renee Ritchie, but Tom Scott, as well as Tom Scott is exceptional at it, as well as Veritasium. Veritasium is another channel that I would highly recommend, and Audio University for those of you who like audio. Audio University is a very simple one, more simple than the other ones. The other ones have bigger budgets, so they have a lot of followers. But you'll see that some great use of knowledge. Not so much that you could do that, because remember, these guys are not, they're companies at this point that do these. But to inspire you on how to visualize some of this stuff, it's pretty interesting.
Next question.
Next question comes from Aaron Graham in Boston. What's a good system for sharing videos and collecting data, as Alex shared?
Yeah, my first thought on that is collecting data is the difficult part. There's technologies involved in eye tracking or attention tracking, and also follow-ups after people watch things. You have focus groups and that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure, and I'll give Alex a chance here to talk about it, but I'm not sure that this is the sort of thing that can be done sort of wide scale or broadly across a school system. Alex?
So YouTube actually has some of that data built into it. So if you look at the YouTube videos that are there, if you go into your data, you're going to see replays, and you're going to see that some of that data there on replay. And so it's not quite the right accurate view of that. The company that did it, that we worked with, was a company called On Networks, and they're now called UStudio, which is a company that does podcasting and data. And I would be surprised if they don't have that data still built in, because it was one of the coolest things that they had built. But they had transformed into that, and they provide that as a service to organizations. So with lots of other ways of delivering those videos, might be actually worth checking out. All the other ones that we've used were proprietary. They're not hard to build. I mean, they take coders, but they're not. But I haven't seen a lot of them other than YouTube and UStudio.
Okay. Next question.
Next question comes from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Can Alex please share for new viewers how he's doing telestration, software and hardware?
Everybody's always asking Alex how he does telestration, and he tends to say, "Well, it works for me, but it's not going to maybe work for you." So
it
go
definitely
ahead.
works. So before I had my own little app, so I have my own little app that I use for this, and I'm talking to some folks about building. I had to move again to another, but I think we have a pretty good chance. One thing to know is that Michael Forrest has got a beta that you can take a look at that is a whiteboard beta, which will actually take an NDI feed and you can draw on it and send the NDI back out. So there are some movement in this area as far as figuring this stuff out. But the way I do it, and again, I have an app that just does a black and white image. So if you look at this here, this is what it looks like, right? So that's what I'm actually drawing on. Except it's actually that's all I'm doing. Okay, so you can, any app that will do a black ink on white will work, and then that's the color fill from the ATEM, and then it's keyed over top of it, just using the key that's built into the ATEM. So what happens is that you have the ATEM switcher. I have a Mac Mini, and I have a Wacom tablet. Now the Wacom tablet has USB, so that USB goes out into the Mac Mini. That's what's allowing me to draw it. You can draw with a mouse. I just happen to be using and the reason I have the Wacom tablet is it's a Wacom 1, which is a video screen, so I can see what I'm drawing. So that goes in, and that's controlling the Mac Mini. The Mac Mini, its HDMI output doesn't go back to the Wacom tablet the way it's designed. It goes into the ATEM as one of the inputs. And so now the Mac Mini is putting this black and white image that I just showed you back out into the ATEM. The ATEM then, one of the program outs from the ATEM then goes into the Wacom tablet. So the Wacom tablet, I'm seeing program with what's called a downstream key on my Wacom tablet. So that's how I see all of this happening. And then that's also, but the composite itself is happening in the ATEM Mini. And that is just a simple key. It just says there's a key fill in downstream keys. This is the key. The fill is just a color. I just made it green. So it's a pretty simple, the key is getting this part done. And again, I continue to effort getting that done as something we can release. But again, Michael Forrest is doing some stuff with an iPad that would get rid of all of this and let you just have it be in and out. But I think it's not out quite yet. So stay tuned for that.
All right. Next question.
Next question comes from Harshid Trivedi, Daytona Beach, Florida. Adding background music or sound effects can be helpful, but how is it a negative factor in your experience?
I think in my experience, having music is only useful if it augments what's going on. So if you've wanted to show the great ballet that is skating, well, then throw some music on it. I only used music to introduce a program and maybe show some credits at the end. And generally, music was a scarce thing in most of the stuff I made. But for any of the promotional work I did, then I would have collages of the activities and a quicker look through everything, such as a hair salon, for instance, and show 5 or 6 hairstylists doing different things very quickly. And then the best way to get over through that is to do it to music, and then let a person just relax and watch the pictures go by. But that is the drawback, is that when you play music, it suggests a romantic layer to what's going on. And unless that's your intention, it can actually put a person in a mood they're not proper for learning. Alex, you can start.
The absolute reference is This American Life. So let's just listen to how they use music. They are exceptional at grabbing basically atmospheric sound effects and picking up things and putting them back in that creates an audio experience for you of where you are and places you there. Unless you're talking about music, I would never use. At this point, I wouldn't use music for stuff. I think it's kind of a legacy from older things. But I would definitely look at This American Life is the right mix of all of this. And sometimes they use music a little bit, and it's a lot of work. I will say, don't do it unless you can do it well. But grabbing, if you're talking about a farm, going out with a microphone and grabbing a bunch of farm noises and then slowly mixing them back in really does have the viewer feel like it's more than just talking about farm animals, and how, but they can hear the cows and they can hear the things or whatever that is, machinery, a coffee, bar, whatever that is, it does put them in that place. And it's something we want to experiment more and more with in related to 5.1 Atmos, that type of thing as well, so that if you're listening to it, you can really get immersed in the experience of it. And it is powerful, but it'll take time to do it well.
I watched a short series documentary on the development of babies, the first 100 days, 100 for 10, I forget how many thousand days it was. It was 5 years. And my wife was enjoying it so much and was so emotionally involved in it. And I pointed out to her that they were adding noises, sound effects, and little moments of music. And then when I showed it back to her and said, right here, the reason you're laughing is because there was a sound here that augmented what the child was doing. And then she realized, of course, you always realize you're being manipulated a little bit, but those little cues like that are a way of drawing people into it without even, it's sort of subconscious, but they're not even aware they're responding to the music. They think they're responding to the picture. Aaron?
For younger students, music is great to pull them in to like start as a hook, but then I would personally fade it so that they're focused on the content, because otherwise they're going to know exactly what music is underneath and they'll be humming it for the rest of the day, but they won't remember what's in the video.
Like a good jingle. Yes. Chris?
My model for artful use of music in support of video is Ken Burns' series on the Civil War. And whenever I hear Ashkan Farewell played on a solo violin, it brings me right back into that moment. So he's just a genius at appropriate and brief, not competing with the visual or the narrator, but somehow shifting our mood or our state in a way that's always delightful and never overdone.
All right. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Alex, you mentioned working for a client is more valuable than doing textbook projects. Could you see potential in partnering schools with nonprofits that need media and tech help?
Go for it, Alex.
Absolutely, and we've helped schools do that in the past. In fact, the school that I have in Rwanda, or that I helped found in Rwanda, does exactly that. So it partners not only with other NGOs, but with the World Bank and many other organizations to produce either live video content. It partners with other schools to provide media, because media is really an accelerator for all of these things. I would say that if I was a school, I would like putting your mask on before you give it to others. I would have the students working with the teachers to produce the content that the school needs first, and then have the most advanced students maybe at the end do some things with external partners. But the schools need so much content right now that I would really focus on their own curriculum before I focused on external resources.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Harshid, what are the thoughts on using movies such as Office Space, for example, that depict organizational behavior and the way the characters work through? What are the thoughts of using movies or other content to make an educational point?
I suppose for me, the difficulty with movies is they're made with a certain entertainment intent. And if you splice them out or just take portions from it, then they become useful instructional pieces. But watching the entire movie itself to get the whole point is a low return kind of experience. If a person's able to take the key moments from Office Space and then illuminate them with a discussion, then you're making very good use of that movie. So it would be something someone's familiar with. And I know that Georgia Dow does a great thing where she explains the psychological processes operating in some of the stories you're watching, Marvel movies, and even she does video games too. And she's talking about the accuracy and the appropriateness of the psychological response of some characters. And she even goes to the point of dressing up like some of the characters to make her point. But she's analyzing it chunk by chunk rather than, director's voice talking over a movie. Alex?
I agree. I think Georgia does a great job at it, and one of the best. And so breaking things up like that to show other things, I think makes sense. And you definitely don't need to see the whole thing, but grabbing onto certain points and talking about why they're important, and even historical points for especially movies that have some historical background. You can grab onto certain things to let them visualize what that looks like. The other thing is if you're doing media training, which is what I focus on, the behind the scenes on what used to be in the old DVDs, but now on the Apple TV or whatever, when you buy the thing, are gold. Like and as a teacher, because I did visual effects, what I would do is I would show the video of that, but then I draw over top of it. Like, this is what actually is happening. Like, they made a consumer version of it, but what I would do is make a pro version of it, which is that I would play it and I'd telestrate over it and talk about how that actually happens and what that actually looks like. And the reason I bring that up is that teachers can do that with all kinds of content. A teacher can add value to the video by taking somebody else's video, whether it's a technical document or fictional, grab that section, play it for the students, but then create much more context for it than what the video itself did, that customizes it for the actual curriculum that they're executing.
Well, Alex, you're quite famous for your technical graphics teardowns that telestrate over top of what a news show has and all that stuff. So yeah, it's useful even in a technical context too. I want to thank everybody who's participated today. The questions were really interesting and generated quite a bit and a lot of departures. I want to thank Erin for hanging in there because she was supposed to leave before now. But next week, if you tune in again, we'll be talking about distance education, where the idea originated, how various attempts to push the idea along, and whether recent global events have been bringing back the idea of teaching at a distance more generally. And I want to thank the team of volunteers to bring this show to you, as I know what it takes to make all this look and sound so good. I also want to thank everyone for contributing their questions and for offering some answers as well. We get more out of this whole experience when it's driven by the questions you ask. Bye for now.
I'm going to go to the farmer's market now. I'm not going to.
You are released.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Did well, Ronny. First time for me as well. So we did it together.
Excellent work. Excellent work.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
2 planites. Go look for them.
Have a good week, all.
Hope to see you next week.
Good night. Good day.
Good night.
Good job, Dave and Ronny.
Yeah. And thanks, Chris. We'll see you around next time. Josh, you're green on green there. It got me all the way through the show. I don't know if that's allowed.
That's right.
You get points taken off.
That's right. It's just a head. I'm just a floating head. That's all.